us off. So officially welcome to our Survive and Thrive webinar series. We are excited to have Katie Ozuno with us. It's been a little bit since she's presented with us, but she is a familiar face to our foundation and to our community. And today she's going to be talking about setting healthy boundaries. Most of you know this, but we are the Texas Oncology Foundation, and we are dedicated to providing cancer support to patients and their loved ones in the communities where they live, work, and receive treatment. And these Survive and Thrive programs are just one of the ways that we get to interact and engage with communities across the state. I am just going to go over a few housekeeping tips. We are on Zoom, and today it's a webinar, so that means you can see and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. So please utilize that chat. And in that too, use the drop down to where it's everybody, and we can all stay connected together discussing that way. A lot of the times there's a questions that you have, and I guarantee other people have them. So don't be afraid to throw it out there for all to see. It always helps us learn from each other. Technical issues, if you're not seeing Katie's slides or anything like that, most of the time just exit and rejoin. That'll reconnect you. And then if you're having audio issues, the best option most of the time is just to call in. And so if you go down to your little menu bar where the mute button is, if you click that up arrow, it'll provide you with the number to call in with. We are going to take questions, but we are going to let Katie do her presentation. So again, use that chat, send us in your thoughts. We want to know what you're thinking throughout her presentation. And then at the end, we're going to host a little Q&A discussion with her. So feel free to use that chat, throw in your questions, and then we'll ask her at the end. Lastly, this is being recorded, and we are going to share a copy of the recorded presentation with all who registered today. And then it's going to be live on our website for you to access in the future. All right. Well, as I mentioned, we have Katie Ozuno with us today. She is a longtime friend with our foundation, and basically we make her do everything with us as far as Survive and Thrive goes.
That's not true. That's not true.
It is. We don't do anything without you. But she just has a wealth of knowledge, and she is a licensed oncology social worker and has also been a long-term patient navigator. And so she is a caregiver herself, so she has been through this and knows firsthand. And so we just love hearing from you. Thank you for always sharing with us in our community, and we're excited to hear from you today, Katie.
Thanks so much, guys. I am so excited to be here. I have loved working with the foundation. They provide such wonderful programming for patients and caregivers. I hope that you guys will consider joining in the fall again when they go back in person, because I know Kelly always has some fun stuff planned, like yoga, Zumba, art workshops, and those in-person Survive and Thrives are just so fun. Today, though, we are here to talk about setting healthy boundaries for a healthy life. So this is all about boundaries. I love boundaries. I love talking about boundaries. I think it's something that is not talked about often enough, whether you're in cancer treatment or not. So today we are going to talk about boundaries. What are they? What do they look like? What do healthy boundaries feel like? And then go through a bunch of scenarios so you can see examples of setting boundaries, how to set them, and then how to talk about boundaries, because that's always pretty difficult. Before we get into boundaries, I always love to give a little information about myself. As Kelly mentioned, I am a caregiver. My husband was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia, about 20 years ago now, I guess. And he has been in a great remission for about 15 years. Being his caregiver, I knew nothing about cancer until I met my husband, and he told me he had leukemia, and I didn't even know what leukemia was. And so you can imagine what that was like. We were in our 20s, and so what that was like jumping in as a caregiver and then getting married and being his caregiver. That entire experience is what led me to oncology and to use my social work degree in oncology. I worked in Dallas for 10 years with Medical City Healthcare as a survivorship navigator. I loved it. I miss Dallas. I loved the team there. We have 3 precious dogs that we love. And recently in 2021, we moved to San Antonio. My dad passed away and I became primary caregiver to my mom. I also entered into infertility treatment myself. And so I say all of that because boundaries are so important for every single role that you have in your life, every relationship you have in your life. And I have found that to be true over this kind of spectrum of my life, the last 15 years, and especially in the last 2 years. So let's get into it. What are boundaries? Well, most people know what the word boundaries mean, what they mean, but they have no idea what they are. People kind of think it's like a property line or a brick wall or like a line in the sand that everyone should see and know. But that's not true. Boundaries are invisible. They are so unique to us as people, and they look different for every person. As with everything in life, there is a wide spectrum of boundaries. You can have very rigid boundaries and you can have very open boundaries. And what you're looking for is a healthy middle. So let's first talk about rigid boundaries. Rigid boundaries will feel like a huge wall. They will feel kind of immovable, impenetrable, and be very isolating. So if you have rigid boundaries, then you probably keep others at a distance. You seem detached even from intimate relationships, like with your partner, with your family, with your very close friends. And you may have very few close relationships. You can have thoughts of wanting to avoid close relationships. Maybe you think, man, someone's going to hurt me. They're going to do something I don't like. And so I'm just not even going to let them get close enough to hurt me. So you'll avoid those close relationships. Maybe your relationships are really volatile. Lots of like, you let someone in, they hurt your feelings, and they are done. They are out. And then eventually they're back in again until they hurt your feelings, and then they're out again. And then you might feel this need to be in control a lot of the time. You want to control your environment, how you feel. And so that results in these kind of more rigid boundaries. And then if you go all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, you have these open boundaries. And boundaries that are too open feel like kind of like you're living in a house with no walls. There's nothing protecting you from your outside environment, from the people outside of your home and your space. So if you have boundaries that are very open, maybe no boundaries at all, you may find yourself getting too involved in other people's problems. You may find it difficult to say no to other people's requests, even if you really want to say no. You may overshare personal information with others like pretty quickly. You meet someone and then all of a sudden you guys are in this really deep life story of yours or of theirs. And then you probably are pretty people pleasing. Again, going back to saying yes when you really want to say no, or maybe doing something for someone when you don't necessarily have the time. So it doesn't feel like you're doing it out of joy and out of giving. It feels like you're doing it so that someone likes you, so that they have a good sense, they have a good feeling when they think of you. And then finally, you may have this need to save people, right? You see people that are hurting or broken, and you want to swoop in and really give to them and care for them and heal them, even if you don't have the bandwidth to do all of that. So then the next question is, what do healthy boundaries feel like? What are healthy boundaries? Well, boundaries are a way to take care of ourselves. When you understand how to set up and maintain healthy boundaries, you can avoid feelings of resentment, disappointment, or anger that build up when your limits have been pushed. So when you have healthy boundaries, you have a higher self-esteem, right? You have a better sense, I'll say, of who you are, what you need, how you need to be taken care of, what you like, what you don't like, and you stay true to that. You stay true to yourself. You'll have feelings of being valued and honored and safe in your relationships instead of stretched thin or feeling very isolated from your relationships. Your boundaries will be flexible and adaptable. They'll be able to change in different situations with different people in your life, very flexible. You'll be able to clearly communicate your wants and your needs. And you will feel empowered to do that, right, when your boundaries are healthy. And then again, like I said before, less resentment, less disappointment, less anger. You'll have healthier relationships overall. So now let's get into types of boundaries. There's all these 5 different types of boundaries. Sometimes we think it's just emotional boundaries, or we think it's just physical, but it gets a little more granular than that. So physical boundaries. This refers to your personal space, your privacy in your body. You might be someone who's comfortable, say, with hugging or with affection, with hand-holding, with kissing in public. Or you might be someone who prefers not to be touched at all. That's an example of a physical boundary. There's sexual boundaries. These are your expectations concerning intimacy. Sexual comments and touches might be uncomfortable for you. And in the cancer world, right, this comes into play, especially if you have a diagnosis like breast cancer or gynecological cancer, prostate cancer. Is something that's a little more intimate location versus like a melanoma or a sarcoma. These conversations might come up a lot more. And so it's important to reflect on those sexual boundaries. Now, intellectual boundaries. These boundaries concern the respect of your thoughts and your beliefs. Intellectual boundaries are not respected when someone dismisses your ideas and your opinions. I see this a lot in the medical world, unfortunately, where a patient won't speak up because they believe that what they have to say and their beliefs about their cancer treatment and their own cancer experience are less important than that of their physician or their nurse or their social worker. And that's just not true. And then emotional boundaries. This refers to honoring a person's feelings and their cadence for sharing. And again, we have that spectrum. You may share everything right away and really love to share and make those really deep connections right away with someone else, or it may be more of a gradual sharing experience where you need a lot of time to build a safe place, to trust someone. And both of those are okay. All of this is okay, right? We're just talking about a full spectrum of the human experience with boundaries. And then financially, this is pretty, self-explanatory, boundaries for how money is spent, boundaries around setting a budget and how much you spend each month on certain things. Cancer can throw, such a huge, expensive wrench into all of your financial boundaries and all of your boundaries in general, right? These all come into play during a cancer experience. So why is it hard to set healthy boundaries? Well, for me, I believe it is these 3 things. What we've learned about boundaries, what we've learned about our own self-worth, and then throwing a cancer diagnosis on top of all of that. So let's look at what we've learned about boundaries. Really, initially, and I would say like the foundation of how you view boundaries in general is from your family and growing up with your family values, right? Your parents, if they haven't worked on self-reflection and their own views of boundaries, then they probably learned it from their parents, and their parents learned it from those parents. And so a lot of those things are passed down generationally, a lot of those values. And that can mean a lot of things. If you are in a family that has maybe not a lot of open boundaries, boundaries are punitive. That's kind of my family, right? I get a lot that the boundaries feel mean, and being mean when I say, hey, I don't like that, or hey, I would prefer that we do this another way. You could also feel like boundaries are a last resort. Someone hurts your feelings, you don't say anything. They hurt your feelings again, you don't say anything. Hurt them again, and then that's it. You're done. And that boundary is a last resort. They're never going to hurt you again because you're never going to talk to them again. And then again, going over to that rigid side, like, man, no one can be trusted. So your boundaries keep everyone out, and you're very isolated. But that is kind of like what we've learned about boundaries. And then next, what we learned about our own self-worth. This comes into play. Boundaries, are to keep us safe. They're to keep us healthy. They're to keep us thriving in our own lives. And it takes, a little bit of courage to set boundaries. And so if you have had your emotional health or any of your boundaries that I listed on that previous slide devalued, you can oftentimes devalue your own worth. And so it's that much harder to establish your boundaries. If you heard growing up a lot that your emotional needs were not important, if you are a survivor of abuse or sexual assault, if you are just told like you need to please everyone else your entire life growing up, then you are going to devalue the boundaries that keep you safe. You're going to have a skewed view of what healthy boundaries are. So you may minimize your own boundaries. You may emphasize the needs of other people for fear of rejection or just wanting them to think of you in a really kind light. Or you may never let anyone get close. Again, your values may be, I only talk to my family about this stuff, or I only talk to my spouse, and we handle it together and no one else needs to know. And then, man, you throw in a cancer diagnosis. So say you have had the best boundaries your entire life. Everything is great. Everything is wonderful. You throw in a cancer diagnosis and it just changes everything. You are navigating an entirely new way of life. And I know in the cancer world, it's common to say, it's a new normal. And I know in the cancer world, it's common for people to hate the new normal because you are grieving the loss of your old normal. You don't want this new normal and you don't want it to be normal. It's not normal. It is unusual. And so I say that because I want you to give yourself a lot of grace and the people around you a lot of grace as you navigate the new needs that you will have after a cancer diagnosis. You're going to be in a more emotionally vulnerable space. You just are. You're learning new medical terminology. You are facing your mortality. And then you have everything else on top of that: work, home life, kids, pets, friends, family, their needs, their concerns. So it's so much. And then you have more responsibility and needs yourself, right? You're going to need more time to rest. You are going to have more things that you have to do, talking to insurance, going to your medical appointments, keeping a running list of your side effects and how you're feeling from day to day, trying to manage nutrition and your own strength. And so your boundaries are going to be different. Your boundaries are going to be different than they were before a cancer diagnosis, even if they were perfect before a cancer diagnosis. So before we get into how we set boundaries, what does that look like, and all those examples, I want to kind of go to this analogy, this common metaphor of like the full cup. We use this with caregivers a lot and talk about pouring. You can't pour from an empty cup. I'm sure you've heard of that before. But it's the same as for a cancer survivor, for someone going through treatment. You have a cup, and that is your energy bandwidth every single day. I would venture to say that before cancer treatment, you start off with a full cup, and cancer treatment automatically takes like a half cup of water away from you every single day. But let's look at the contents. So when you have a full cup, this is fresh water. You just got this water, very purposeful about, I want a glass of water. I'm going to drink this glass of water. It's abundant. It's refreshing. When you get to that half water, if you're like me, I have cups of water everywhere. And once they're to that halfway mark, it's room temperature, it's tepid. It's there. It will hydrate me. But am I like looking forward to it? No. And then once you get to that empty cup, oh man, it's just drops. It's leftover water. There's a lot of scarcity there. And that is the same with your energy bandwidth, right? You want boundaries for two reasons here. You want to have as full of a cup as you can through cancer treatment. And you also want others to be able to fill your cup for you. Because as I mentioned before, cancer takes like a big gulp of your energy bandwidth per day. So when your cup is full, you're waking up prepared and thoughtful and care-oriented. You know how your day is going to look. You're going to know what your responsibilities are. Maybe you're going to a chemo infusion. You have your care bag ready. You know when you get home, how the meals are going to go, where they're coming from, how the kids are getting home from school, the pets are walked and fed, right? It's really prepared. It's really thoughtful. Then when your energy level is halfway through, can we go into this utilitarian, this task-oriented mode? Like, man, I have all these things to do today. I'm just going to do as much as I can and then pass out, and then go to bed and then wake up the next morning. And then your cup is already at halfway or less because you didn't build in the things you wanted into that day, rest, or other people helping you with some of those items that you have that day. And then, man, if you're waking up with an empty cup each day, there's just nothing left, right? You're hurried, you're unintentional. It's just kind of like a scramble mode and a survival mode. And it's hard when you're at that empty cup to refill your own cup and get back up to a more abundant way of going through your days. And so again, boundaries allow you to have something to pour and also allow people to pour into you. So how do we move towards that kind of like full cup? How do we move towards that full cup? How do you determine your boundaries? Well, if you've ever been to a presentation of mine, like how to communicate cancer, how to find joy amidst adversity, how to care for the caregiver, I always say this first. Start with the end in mind and work backwards. Start with your goal, start with what you want, this ideal version of what you want, and work backwards. You might not reach that ideal version. You might not wake up each day like, but you will get farther than if you try to start from where you are and move forward, if that makes sense. So here are 3 questions, 3 prompts that I would love for you to ask yourself after this presentation and as you plan for your boundaries. 1, how do you want to show up each day? And this, again, this doesn't have to be excited, like, yeah, I'm going to treatment today. It doesn't have to be happy. It can be, man, I really want to show up and just be able to focus on treatment. I just want to be able to go to infusion and come home and rest, and have a great meal for dinner and spend time with my family. Those can be your goals for your day. And then how do you want to feel in your relationships? Man, do you want to feel and do you want to say, man, I don't have any support from anyone. I'm doing this on my own. Chances are that doesn't feel very good. But maybe your goal is to say, man, I have the exact support I need from the people in my life. They are making this so much easier for me. Maybe those are your goal thoughts and your goal feelings for your relationships. And then finally, how do you want to show up each day for yourself? Do you want to show up each day already at the bottom of your cup, already depleted, no time for yourself? You got to take care of the kids. You got to take care of the family. You got to take care of the pets. You got to clean. You got to cook the meals. Got to go to treatment. You have a list of phone calls to make about finances and insurance. Do you want to feel exhausted and overwhelmed? Or do you want to show up every day as an advocate for yourself, as a friend to yourself, being able to give to yourself in the form of rest, in the form of a hobby, in the form of something you love? Do you want to have something to look forward to every day? Those are the questions. And now, once you have answered and thought about and kind of envisioned what that ideal kind of day, those feelings, what those look like for you, it's time to create an emotional game plan. And so this is just some examples. And I love to go over these examples. I'll just kind of go over them briefly. But this is a grid you could create at your house, on your computer easily. And you're going to look at this like a scientist, right? You're going to say, okay, this is my current feeling, exhausted, overloaded. My goal feeling is I have enough bandwidth for quality time with my family. Every day I can spend some quality time with them. And then just list out some things that could help. Man, my friend offered to bring dinner over one night, and I'm going to ask them to do that Thursday. Or, man, my cousin asked how I can help. I'll ask them to just Venmo me some money so I can order in dinner. Or I'll have them order me something to be delivered for dinner. Another idea, I'm going to ask a social worker to help us find a house cleaning service once a month so that I don't have to worry about cleaning as much. Or you're going to budget in a lawn care service twice a month. Man, when my dad passed away, we had a neighbor that just had a lawn service come and start mowing our lawn for us. And that was one of the best things that I could have asked for. I wouldn't have even thought to have asked for. So budget that out. Or I'm going to schedule a weekly family movie night and order in food. The idea is that you're moving towards your goal. And then in that final column, like, what are the results? What did you do and how did that make you feel? So here's an example. I had dinner delivered Thursday and I got to spend time taking a nap instead of cooking. And that was refreshing. Or I emailed the social worker to find a cleaning service and I'm waiting to hear back. So you made a little progress and you want to kind of like, these are your notes to track how you're feeling and how you're doing, what's working, what isn't working. Because then once you find what works, man, great, that works. You're done with this. This is off your list. And then you can go down the same thing. You're feeling overwhelmed and isolated, and I want to feel like my loved ones know exactly how to support me. So I'm going to email my loved ones every Friday with things I'd like help with the following week. This actually comes from one of my former patients. She would do it every Sunday and say, hey, these are the things I need help with this week. I need some rides on these days. I would love it if someone would bring a meal over on these days. And man, that really worked for her. And anyone that said, hey, let me know if you need help with something or how I can help, she would just add them to the email list. And so you could try that, or I'm going to let my loved one know when I'm having a hard day and how they can make it better. I'm going to reinforce things that work for me. I'm going to get a therapist to help me set boundaries and help me with language for those boundaries. Those are all the ideas. And then you have your results. I let my sister know I was having a bad day and we went to a movie. And how did you feel? Maybe it took your mind off of what was going on. You got to just relax. It was a low impact hanging out, as I like to call it. And maybe that's something, maybe that's now your game plan for a bad day. I'm going to go see a movie with my sister. And then after that, you're going to reinforce things that work for you. So I texted my sister, thank you for going to a movie with me. It was just what I needed. And that way your sister knows, hey, this is what you need. This is what you like. This is her role in caring for you. And there's more of that. There's more of doing the things that you need. And then finally, gosh, boundaries with yourself. So your current feeling is negative self-thoughts, no self-care. You're used to doing for everyone in your family, doing for everyone around you, and you still feel called to do everything for everyone. I know I'm speaking to someone out there because that is so common. And your goal feeling is, I want to be an advocate and friend to myself every day. A lot of times I do this work with patients and with caregivers of, what would you say to your best friend? Like if your best friend was going through the exact same treatment you are and telling you, no, I gotta do this, I gotta mow the lawn, I gotta cook the dinners, I gotta take the kids, like I'm the only one that can do it, what would be your advice to them? And then take your own advice. Sometimes that's the hardest part. And so your game plan, okay, I'm gonna join a support group for survivors so that I can talk to other people who have either been in my spot or who are going through it just like I am. I'm going to seek a therapist to help me navigate this new territory, help me figure out where my boundaries are and how to talk about my boundaries, how to get support. And I'm going to practice turning negative self-talk into supportive self-talk. So when I say man, I have to do this, I'm going to rephrase that into, could someone else do this for me so that I can rest? And so then your results, I joined a support group and I met a new friend and we exchanged information. And then I practiced listening to a kinder voice in my head. When I was looking in the mirror and I hated my scars, I practiced just looking at them and saying, these are my scars. This is my body. This body carries me through a lot. I love my body. Like, you know, you just practice. So this is kind of just all of it. You practice going from where you are to where you want to be. And the more you practice going where you want to be, the easier it will be, right? I sometimes talk about boundaries, man, like they are highways. Well, let me back up. When you're exploring a new territory, like setting boundaries, setting healthy boundaries for the first time, it feels uncomfortable. It feels new. It feels like you're traversing like a dirt road. It hasn't been paved yet. It's really thin. You don't quite know where you're going. But the more you practice setting boundaries, the more you practice listening to yourself, the more you practice and seek and find what works for you, the easier that road gets, right? Think about your drive to work, right? It's a route you take every single day. You know it well. You could probably get there blindfolded and back. And that's eventually how healthy boundaries will feel. They will feel like a well-traversed road versus like, oh, this is new and new territory. So how do we talk about boundaries? Oh man, it's sometimes so hard to even open up the conversation about boundaries. So start small, build them up slowly. You don't have to do an overhaul all at once. It can start with, saying like, say your scheduler gives you an appointment and and it's early in the morning at 9 a.m. and you don't want to wake up at 9 a.m. because you have trouble getting to sleep. Saying, hey, that doesn't work for me. Can we try a later time? That's a small boundary. That's a great place to start. And you can move at a more comfortable pace. And you can also have that time, like I was talking about in the previous slide, to reflect on how that felt. And then set them early. Set boundaries early. It can be really hard to establish new boundaries, especially in pre-existing relationships. And again, you have a cancer diagnosis now, and so you're going to have pre-existing relationships and people that want to support you and want to help you, and they may not know how. They may have no experience with cancer before this. And so start early with what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and reinforce what works for you. And then be consistent. letting boundaries slide, like saying, hey, this is a boundary, and then a little while later saying, okay, well, that's okay, you can do that sometimes. It's so confusing. Say you don't want someone coming over unannounced, but then they come over unannounced and you let them in and then you hang out. But then the next time they come over unannounced, you're like, no, I told you don't come over unannounced. But that can get so confusing. And so be consistent and be patient. Not everyone's going to get it the first time. In fact, I would say a majority don't get it the first time, and that's okay. And then you want to create a specific framework. You don't want people to have to read your mind with your boundaries. Like, they are going to get it wrong, and that is going to lead to frustration because they're getting it wrong. So you want to say, this is what I need. This is when I need it. This is how I need it. And when they get it right, reinforce that. Man, that was just what I needed. I really appreciate that. You made my day so much easier. Thank you for giving me that time to rest. When I had that time to rest, then later I could do some activities with my kids, and I was really wanting to do that. Thank you for taking the dog for a walk for me. Thank you for getting that lawn mowing service. Thank you for sending that food. Be overly grateful and communicative and specific so that you guys are all on the same page. And then be aware of social media. Social media creates a lot of, everyone has a different level of comfortability on social media. There can be a lot of communication, but you don't always know what is being shared. So like if you are on one of those blog sites and you share what's going on, someone may take a snippet of that and share it on their social media. I've had plenty of patients who have, started a small group to give updates like on Facebook or in an email or in a blog. And then a family member has then shared that, like, please pray for my cousin. This is her diagnosis. This is, all of this stuff. And gosh, that's heartbreaking. And that is a violation of boundaries that a patient has set or that someone has set. And so be very, again, clear on social media with what people are able to share and who they're able to share it with. Okay, so what does healthy boundaries setting sound like? Situation. I'm just going to go through this again like the last grid. The situation is a well-meaning but smothering family member. Man, don't we all have those? Currently, they insist on coming over even when you don't want them to. Maybe this is a mother-in-law or someone equally as well-meaning but smothering. So what you want is respect for your family time. Here's what you can say. As a family, we really need some downtime to connect and decompress. We're going to use our weekends for family time moving forward. Let's schedule a night during the week that we can have dinner together. I would love that. And then again, reinforce that. If they come over on the weekend, say, hey, this is family time. We really need this together. Let's schedule something next week, or have your caregiver do it. And then a work boundary. A leader is asking you to join another project at work. What you really want is not another project at work. You want more time to relax. So what you can say, one of my professional goals is to streamline my focus to current projects. And you can say that whether you've shared your cancer diagnosis or not. And then situation, someone who says something insensitive, holy moly, this happens all the time. And people will just say whatever. They said something that's just crossed the line. What you want is to advocate for yourself. There's something you could say. I know you're well-meaning, but that's actually something really insensitive to say because blank. And something else you can say is blank. So you're giving them your boundary, but you're being very specific about why that's not really cool to say, and then what they could say instead. I have a personal story about this that I share all the time. I have shared it since it happened. When I was just starting off in social work, I ran a support group for many years. I loved it. I still keep in touch with some of those patients today. And one of them, she'd been in the support group for about a year, a little more. She had finished treatment, and her hair wasn't coming back. It wasn't growing back. And so she was wearing wigs, she was wearing scarves, in Texas, how hot it gets. And one day after group, we were kind of just walking out to the cars, and she was like, man, I am so frustrated. My hair is just not growing back. I want it to be back. It's just really frustrating me. And me, well-meaning, right? Well-meaning, I said, I have faith that it's going to grow back and you'll get there. And man, she looked at me, to her credit, she looked at me and said, Katie, I hate it when people say that because it may never grow back. I may be bald forever. And I'm really sad about that. And boy, that just changed my whole perspective. My intent was to support her, to give her love. But I can see now that I was really discounting her own feelings about her cancer experience. I was trying to give her comfort instead of hearing her and where she is and saying, that sucks. I'm so sorry. What can I do to support you best right now? How can I help? Is there anything I can do? And man, that was so courageous of her. That was so courageous of her. She changed the landscape for me of cancer care and support, because I've never said that to another patient since then. And if she hadn't provided me that education and that grace, who knows how many people I would have said that to that would have then written me off as someone who doesn't get it. So that's an example I love of when I was insensitive unintentionally and someone didn't write me off. They gave me grace. And so finally, okay, let's move on down. The situation is yourself. You are just being yourself and you're feeling guilty for having some self-care time. What you want is to enjoy self-care, and you want to enjoy it guilt-free, because it's not self-care if you're feeling guilty the entire time. So something you can say to yourself, you can create a mantra. An example is caring for myself is a priority during treatment. And hopefully at some point you will drop off during treatment and you'll bridge over to caring for myself is a priority. Okay, so that's what it sounds like. What does success look like? What does success when you are setting boundaries look like? Well, it's not one conversation that is really well received and then you never discuss it again. I have never known that to happen, right? Boundaries are messy. Even if you have a healthy view of boundaries, the people you're setting boundaries with may not. You may say, hey, I need an hour. I have a great example. My husband was in treatment, right? We were at MD Anderson, and we had gone from living apart. I was in San Antonio finishing a master's degree. He was in Dallas, and he needed to go to MD Anderson for a clinical trial. And so we went from living apart to living in one singular room together. And that was a lot. We were 28, 29 at the time, going through cancer treatment, living in one room together of our friend's apartment. And one day, Justin said to me, he tried to set a boundary. He could have done a better job. I could have done a better job receiving it. But he was like, I need an hour of time away from you every day. Like, I just need an hour of time in silence. And man, as you can imagine, at 28 was like, oh, okay, I'll give you silence. And he got so much silence, he didn't even know what to do with himself. And so that's an example of like, man, that didn't go well the first conversation, but we were able to come back to it and say, what went wrong there? And he's able to better explain, like, I'm overwhelmed all the time. I just need some time by myself. And I was able to say, okay, I wish you had said that instead of you need time away from me. And we were able to talk through it and come to a really healthy boundary that worked for both of us. But it was not one conversation that went really well. It was multiple conversations that went better each time. And so success is the act of setting a boundary, not the results. You can only control what you do. You can only control that you are caring for yourself, that you are setting boundaries to create a safe space for yourself. You cannot control how someone else reacts. So that is not your success. The success is being an advocate for yourself. The success is saying, this is what I need, and staying true to what you need. And then two, consistently advocating for yourself. I just mentioned that is success. Consistently holding the boundaries you set. Setting boundaries is so important, as I hope you got from this presentation, but just as important is consistently holding them. So not making them as a last resort, not making them in an emotional state. So man, that person said something mean to me, I am never talking to them again, right? That's an emotional state, and that boundary is set in emotion, and that might not be the best boundary for you, and it's going to be hard to stick to that boundary, right? What if they come back and say, like, listen, I'm really sorry, I reflected on what I said, and I'm so sorry about that. Well, then your heart might soften a little bit, and that boundary shifts again. And so really setting boundaries and reflecting on them, and making sure that they are something you can stay consistent to. So room for imperfection on both ends. Grace is so important, right? Grace is so important. The cancer experience is so hard. It is so taxing in so many levels and in so many ways. And perfection, it can just not be the expectation, both for yourself in setting boundaries and for people, adhering to the boundaries that you set. People are going to mess up, man. And the grace that you give them will teach them how to care for you better. And the grace you give to yourself will give you more encouragement to set boundaries and go along on this journey of finding where your healthy boundaries are. Now, multiple conversations, as I mentioned before, it's not going to be one conversation that goes perfect. Multiple conversations should be expected and encouraged, because the end goal is a much healthier way of living through your cancer treatment. It seems like a lot of work up front, and maybe it is, but the back end is that you are being cared for and you are feeling really resilient in your own cancer experience. You're getting what you want out of your cancer experience where you can. And then finally, growth. There has to be growth in your relationships and in your boundaries and in the way that you set boundaries. So look for growth and not perfection when you're going through this. And that is my final slide. So I will stop sharing my screen. And then we can go to questions. Yeah, anything you guys want.
Perfect. Katie, thank you so much for sharing. That was really great. I do want to pause and apologize. I've meant to introduce Rachel at the beginning of this webinar, so I'm going to pause real quick. If you guys have questions or thoughts for Katie, start throwing them in the chat. I'm going to introduce Rachel, and then we're going to do this Q&A discussion. But I do have Rachel Perkins here with me today. She is the new education and outreach specialist at our foundation. So all of you who participate in our Survive and Thrive are going to start seeing a new face. And we are very excited and thankful to have her on our team. Okay, so y'all throw in questions if you have it, but I wrote down a few thoughts, and I'm sure Rachel also had some questions. But first, I loved that you started out with seeking a balance in that healthy boundary. I think it's so easy to fall in one of the extremes. And so I like that you set it up that way. Um, Especially then when you do throw in that, cancer diagnosis and all of those things just feel out of whack and out of control. And, for me, when you were talking about the 5 different types of boundaries, and then the addition of that cancer diagnosis, the one that stuck out to me was financials just have to feel way out there, out of your control. And so that one really stuck out for me. But I liked that emotional goals that you set up in that chart. And I think that one, it's a great way to break it down. But two, how amazing to get to reflect on that and look back on that documentation, and just seeing where you were and where you are. But what if it's hard to get started with that? Do you have any suggestions, or could you elaborate a little bit more on like doing your first one? How do you zero in on what you're actually feeling in that moment?
Yeah, so like how to start setting boundaries or how to get started. And yeah, I think like I would start with evaluating how you're feeling now. Like for instance, cancer treatment is exhausting. And so, your energy levels are reduced just naturally because of treatment and the cancer itself. And so looking at like, okay, if I'm feeling depleted every day, I don't want to feel depleted every day. So looking at the places where kind of like you're not satisfied, and then like really imagining, okay, how would this look ideally? Like ideally, I would have tons of energy every day. Well, I may never get to tons of energy every day, but if I envision what that could look like, oh, that would look like someone maybe taking over meals a couple of times a week. That would look like, a house cleaner coming. That would look like someone mowing the yard. That here's all of the ways where I could get some energy back every day. You're moving in that right direction. And through that movement, you will see what works and what doesn't work. Like maybe someone offers to make meals and man, they're not a great cook and you don't love those meals. And so then you move on, like then maybe you ask someone else, or you, or you set up like a fund where then that money is used for meals that you feel like, because you don't know what you're going to feel like eating every day. Or so you just kind of look at it as a scientist, like what is not working right now and how would I like for it to work, and just start moving. And then you will just figure out more along the way.
Mm-hmm. And Katie, that's a good segment into one of the questions I had about how do you gain the confidence to ask for help? Like when you were going through that spreadsheet, I really loved it, but I know that there's some people that are like, well, I know what I need, I just don't know how to ask for it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like asking for help is so tough it's like so complex, right? Mm-hmm. Like sometimes we don't ask for help because we feel like we should be able to do it all. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't ask for help because what if someone says no? Then I still don't have help, and then I asked for it and I still don't have it, and that's disappointing. One way you can move is by asking your caregiver to ask for help. Like, hey, I need help with taking the kids to baseball practice. Could you figure out someone on the team that could do that for us? And then once they've made that connection, maybe then you are like, hey, you took my kid to school or to practice. Can you do that again? Or, your caregiver can be just such a dynamic force in helping you set boundaries with other people. And then like also asking for help and kind of some of those more vulnerable moments, employing a caregiver, or even having like 2 or 3 primary caregivers that are sort of like your megaphone and your kind of voice, helping you advocate for yourself. That can be so empowering for you and also for them in supporting you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I keep well, during your presentation, I told Rachel, I said, Katie's always the voice of reason in my head when I have to communicate, even just within marriage now. And I was like, because she
Yeah.
makes it feel so doable and effortless. And those examples were very, she turned to me and she goes, oh, you're right. And,
well, that's really kind. That's
yeah.
really kind. Communication is so complex. Everything is so complex, and then a cancer diagnosis adds so much heaviness to those complexities, and it can oftentimes like increase the emotional vibrations, all of the negative emotional vibrations in these hard ways that make communication even more difficult. Mary Lynn just talked about her nurse navigator. I am such a champion for nurse navigators. They are so awesome. If you are with HCA healthcare, like in Austin, it's St. David's Healthcare, in Dallas, it's Medical City Healthcare, in San Antonio, it's Methodist Healthcare. Your nurse navigators, ask for a nurse navigator. They are there to be your support and to walk beside you during cancer treatment. They're there to help you with communication. They're there to help you with resources. They're there to help explain all of the medical terminology, help explain communications with your medical teams. They are like this hybrid social worker nurse, this hybrid, I don't want to say creature because they're humans, but this role that is really created to support you. And so I encourage you to always ask for a nurse navigator. They can help with a lot of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
From Baylor Dallas, awesome. Baylor Dallas has nurse navigators too. That's right.
Yeah. And then just one more thought. I really liked when you were talking about success, and I loved the distinction of success is the act of setting the boundary, not the result. And I think, that kind of empowers all of us to just do it, like just try it. And that's the important step. It's not necessarily what comes. So I think that's a good reminder.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're so focused on results, I feel like, in this society. Like, what is the grade on the test? What place did you get in the race? But the journey of getting to those places is your success. Like, what did you learn when you tried to set a boundary? How did you grow? What are you going to try next time? And each time you go, you are closer and closer and closer, and you're learning more about yourself, and you're practicing setting boundaries. You're practicing like really knowing yourself and knowing what works and knowing who you are. And that is the success. It can't be someone else. It can't be this like how someone else reacts or if someone respects that boundary, because that's just unpredictable. And that says more about them than it does about you. And so always keeping that success controllable, and growth is controllable for sure.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you for spending this hour with us. We always appreciate your time and getting to hear from you. We did get one question. Whom do you ask about getting a nurse navigator?
Yeah, Kathleen, I would ask like everyone. I would ask your physician, do they have a nurse navigator? If they say no, I would ask, an admin at the hospital, do you have nurse navigators? If there's a resource or a resource center at the hospital too, go to the resource center. Does this hospital have nurse navigators? I would just ask a social worker. I would ask anyone, is there a nurse navigator? Because sometimes the nurse navigators in the system I work for, they are hospital-based. They are not physician-based. So the physicians don't hire them to navigate you. They are a service of the hospital. And some physicians that are maybe new to that hospital or have maybe not bought into nurse navigation, they may not know, or they may just say, oh no, we don't have that, but they may be available to you. Oh yeah, Mary Lynn said my surgeon was the one that connected us, and they happen to be on the same floor. Yeah. So I would ask just anyone and everyone.
Yeah. That's perfect. All right, well, we are at noon, so I'm going to start wrapping us up. Katie, once again, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining and participating with us today. Just a reminder, we did record this. You are going to get a copy of it, and it is going to be housed on our website on our webinar archive page. So be on the lookout there. And then join us in April. On April 11th, we have Monica Bryant with Triage Cancer coming, and she is going to talk to us about don't drown in medical debt. So don't miss that. And then our February 7th intimacy webinar with Francesca that was canceled, got rescheduled for June 6th. So be sure to, if you registered, your registration link will still work. So join us on June 6th for that one. And then, yeah, just follow us on Facebook for all of our great updates. And as Katie plugged at the beginning, there are plans to come back in person. So be sure to stay up to date with us, look at our website, follow us on Facebook. And yeah, we're excited to see people in person. But yeah, thank you all for joining. And Katie, thanks again for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Have a great rest of the week.
Bye.
Have a good one, y'all.